Hi, everyone. Julianna Forlano. Happy to be here with you via act.tv. Thanks for watching. Thanks for coming back. Dean Baker, senior economist from the Center for Economic and Policy Research, joined me today for this amazing conversation. We started out talking about supply chain issues. He had a totally different take on it than some of the other interviews we've been doing. So I encourage you to watch the car part supply issue. If you want to buy a car, like I was trying to buy a used car, it's going to stick around for a while. On the flip side, if you have a used car, you want to watch this interview because you can probably make some cash out of it. Secondarily, we went all over the place. We talked about housing markets, student loans, and other things. It was a wide-ranging discussion about economic policies and economic forecasts that may hit all of us. What Biden did that was good, what he needs to do. Is there going to be free college? Stay tuned and hear Dean's perspective. And thanks for watching. Dean, hi. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks a lot for having me on.
Well, this topic is concerning to everyone. I was talking about trying to buy a car, and the used cars are more expensive, actually, than the new cars because of the computer chip. There's a supply line problem. Can you talk about how these supply line issues are going to affect our economy? And is it going to get back to a sense of normal at some point?
Well, it's interesting. People have been hyping supply line issues as being, this horrible disaster. And we've been through a once in a century pandemic. Let's hope at least the last time we had one like this was a century ago, over a century ago. So, maybe they will be more frequent. We don't know. But in any case, certainly a very, very rare event. And given that, I actually think our supply lines held up reasonably well. Now, the specific one you're mentioning, the shortage of semiconductors that's making it difficult, auto manufacturers, several of them have had to shut down their plants for several days. That is clearly a supply line issue. So what happened there was we had limited supply. Obviously, this is a monopolized sector, so in normal times, there's not a lot of overproduction. That's often what happens in a monopolized sector. They have little incentive to increase capacity, so they limit their capacity. And a major supplier in Taiwan was put off. I think it was Taiwan, but forgetting whether it's Taiwan or Japan. Doesn't matter. The point is, a major supplier was put offline by a fire. So we did not have a lot of excess capacity in the world. We lost a major supplier. That is a supply chain issue. But people have been raising it in other contexts, and I think for the most part that's not correct. So you have a lot of cases where we had temporary shortages of items during the pandemic, and you go, well, we had a lot of facilities shut down all over the world, including in the United States. So the idea that, oh my God, our supply line goes through China or it goes through whatever country, if we just had in the United States, well, no, we had facilities shut down here too. So trying to say, okay, we want to make sure so that if we have a once in a century pandemic, shutting down much of the world's production capacity in random patterns. I mean, we didn't know where it was going to be shut down, that there's no shortages of anything. Well, you can't do that. Or if you did try to do that, you would spend an enormous amount of money, which most of the time, hopefully, we would never have need for. So I think the issue, calling everything a supply chain problem, really has been misleading. Although, again, the semiconductors, I really do. That's a classic supply chain story.
Should I wait to buy the car? That's the question. This is all about me.
I don't want to make jokes out because I know a lot of people are having hard times, but you've seen this huge increase in used car prices by some measures.
Well, that's the thing. I wanted to buy a used car, and it's almost as expensive as buying a new one.
Well, I mean, again, I don't want to make a joke out of it because I know a lot of people, it's really hard times, but a lot of people have used cars that they don't use much. They can make a lot of money selling them today, which actually I shouldn't make a joke out of all. They should do that.
Actually, call me because seriously, for people who can't buy a new car and who only can afford a used car, it's impossible to get a car.
Well, and you'll be doing someone a favor. So it's not, this isn't a case of, you're taking advantage of someone. People need cars and they can't get them. So if you have a used car that you use rarely, I mean, it's a great chance to get a little money and help someone out, really.
So is there, in the car area, from my personal knowledge, is there an end to this in sight? Are they going to bring the factory back online? Is it going to?
Well, you have existing factories that are looking to increase capacity, which they have some ability to do. As I understand it, this factory can't be back online for at least a year and possibly longer.
Wow.
So It takes, I mean, it's super, this is a complex, people talk about things being complex manufacturing processes. This is one, because it has to be very clean. You can't have, it's not like the old auto factories where, you went and when they were, all sorts of things in there. Everything has to be super clean. Everything has to be very carefully measured. So it's not the sort of thing that you could just get up and running in 3 months. So there might be strains on semiconductors for a year or so, maybe longer.
I'm going to sell my old car and buy a new car with the money that I get off my old car. Anyway, I don't want to make this all about me. The questions really are getting back to something that you said in terms of if we were making them here, it wouldn't have necessarily meant that everything wouldn't have, there would be no disruption. Doesn't it seem like we would have at least a little bit more control about, and also it would provide jobs? Wouldn't it be better to have at least a fraction of anything that we might need produced here in the U.S.?
Well, there's very few things we don't have a fraction of. So in the case of semiconductors, much of our semiconductors are still produced here. So, is that the optimal amount? That's hard to say, but there are very few things that we don't produce some of here. One of the things that was, of course, a big issue earlier on in the pandemic, we had shortages of much medical protective gear. And people were saying, oh, the supply chain, much of that came from China or imported from other countries, largely China. And that really was misleading, because the real problem there was a stockpile issue. Because even if we were producing the stuff here, you can't get another 150 million masks out of a factory in a week or 2 weeks, even if it's, in Detroit or somewhere in the middle of the United States. It takes time. The big failure was a stockpile failure. And it's important to identify that. I'm not, picking on people or anything, but we should have had a large stockpile.
I think we could pick on some people for not having.
We could pick on people, but that's the point here is, to get the policy right. And the key issue here was we needed large stockpiles of protective medical gear. Again, I'm hoping we won't see another pandemic like this in our lifetime and kids' lifetime, whatever, let's hope. But in any case, things happen, and we should have protective medical gear in large quantities in stockpile, and we didn't. So that wasn't supply chain, that was stockpile.
Let's talk about the housing situation and what's going on in terms of, well, there's much going on. People fleeing from cities, foreign investors buying up entire tracts of new housing being built. And then there's a lumber shortage. I'll just let you start wherever you feel is best.
Yeah, well, this is an interesting story. I mean, a lot of people have been asking me, is this a bubble? Because, of course, I was yelling about the housing bubble back in, 2002, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 till it burst. And it's not a bubble. This is being driven by the fundamentals in the market. So we see a lot of demand for homes. One hand, low interest rates are a factor. We've had extraordinarily low mortgage rates. Secondly, people are moving because of the pandemic. People are realizing many people are able to work remotely who couldn't previously. So you could hold your job in New York or Boston or other major cities with expensive real estate and live in the middle of the country and telecommute. So that we've seen a huge increase in prices in a lot of relatively modestly priced markets. So that's a big factor. And then on the building side, we had this situation where lumber manufacturers didn't anticipate this rebound. So again, it's one of these things that you go, what were you guys thinking? They didn't anticipate that we would have a strong rebound in 2021. So they shut down mills and they weren't prepared. Now they will be able to get those up running. This isn't a year's problem. This is a month's problem. I haven't studied the industry closely, so don't buy or sell based on my predictions here. But I think it's very likely a month or two out we'll have much more lumber and prices will be considerably lower. Again, it still takes time to build a home. So when will we see supply catch up in demand? That might be a story at the end of this year, 2022. But, this is, to my view, a largely healthy story that you're seeing a lot of smaller towns, smaller cities being revitalized, people leaving, be clear, there's still going to be plenty of people in New York and San Francisco, but, maybe there'll be somewhat less pressure on land prices, house prices there, a good thing, less congestion, good thing. So
you can buy a 1-bedroom apartment in New York for only $750,000 instead of $1.5 million.
Exactly. So that's an improvement. It's still, I'm not going to tell anyone New York's going to be cheap. It won't be, but it might be somewhat cheaper than it was, say, in 2019.
I just moved to a small town in Torrington that was known for production ball bearings. You know, they're not making any ball bearings anymore, but it used to have a very large factory that employed 50,000 workers. Basically, the whole town, when that went out, you know, the story of sort of the Rust Belt, there was just basically no work, and it's been economically challenged ever since then. And it has done that thing that those areas do. It's gone red when it used to be blue. So I noticed in the New York Times that this particular area got a huge bump in New Yorkers moving out of town. I'm hoping that the town itself will be uplifted by the influx of new people whom they, of course, hate so far. So there are cultural issues in addition to economic issues. Can you talk about what's the timetable for a revitalization of a small town who just got maybe another, I'd say, a bump to their population by a magnitude of maybe 2/10?
Yeah, well, I think there's tremendous potential. Part of it will be the extent to which they embrace this. So the extent to which they try to invite people from New York and other, high-priced areas to come in, and you mentioned the cultural issues. Obviously, there'll be some. So you have a lot of, conservative Trump supporters who might not like all these liberal types from the big cities. The question is, are they willing to live with it? Are they willing to say, okay, we could be neighbors, and this is a good thing, or are they going to try and make it difficult? Because the places that embrace it, try to have amenities, fix up the parks, they'll have more money coming in so that they'll be able to do that. And, that will lead more people to come in. So I think what you'll see is some areas that really embrace this and try and have an open door policy, others that try and make it as difficult as possible for these people to move in. And of course, the former group, they're going to do very well. The latter, they'll probably continue on the path they've been on, which is not a very good one for the most part.
What do you see are the things that we should be keeping our eye on in terms of the in terms of the economy coming up over the next few months? Are you hopeful?
Yeah, I'm very hopeful. I mean, we had a weaker than expected, I'll say I expected jobs report that came out in April. I mean, came out in May, but it's for April. And we'll have another one in a week and a half, which again, I'll go out on a limb here. I expect it to be very strong, at least 7 or 800,000, could well be over a million. So what we're looking for is to see a lot of the jobs we lost in the pandemic to come back in the next few months, and the unemployment rate get down to more normal levels. And again, what normal is, 4%, 3.5%. Can we do better? We'll see. But I think the unemployment rate is going to come down very quickly. The big fear that, many economists have, and I'll put myself in that camp, I'm worried about it too, that, we'll see inflation come along. And, it's important to scrutinize the data, because some of these price increases we know are transitory. We're talking about cars. Well, that's not sort of classic inflation like what we had in the 70s. We had a semiconductor plant go out and, a shortage of cars. So, that the prices probably won't keep going up. And at some point, I'm not sure when, they'll likely come down a fair bit. But for the time being, yeah, there's pressure on car prices. Other things are just reversing pandemic plunges. So we had a plunge in airfares in the pandemic. They're going to go up. They went up in April. They'll go up again in May and June, July. And, presumably get back to roughly where they were before the pandemic. So we're going to see what might look like inflationary problems. Those are not. What we're concerned about is underlying inflation. Do we start to see rapid rises in rents again, in healthcare costs, to college tuition, other areas that have been problems in years past? So that's what we should be looking for, and that's something that I'm very much worried about. But I think for the near-term future, we're looking at a very promising picture in terms of people being able to get jobs back and getting pay increases, and that's a very good story.
Do you think that President Biden's policies have been as useful as you believe they could have been?
I think his recovery package was fantastic. I mean, I was really impressed when he put that on the table, because it was very bold and it does have a very big impact. And I just assumed that it would be whittled down in Congress because, it did put up, asked for a lot. And I assumed that, people would raise this issue and that issue. I thought maybe he'd get 2/3, 3/4 of it, but he got it. He got the whole thing. I was quite impressed. So that makes a big difference both in bringing the economy back quickly, but it also does things, this child tax credit that been estimates it could cut child poverty in half. That's a huge deal.
I wish we could have put that on this year's taxes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the way they're structuring it, they will be sending the credit to people come, I believe, July. They're looking to have, because it's going to be paid out over the course of the year. This is different from the way it was done in the past. In the past, you filed your tax return at the end of the year, and then you got paid for the prior year. They're structuring this so that it'll be paid out over the course of the year, which is
That's
great.
smart because people need money to spend right now. They don't need,
Yeah,
by the time day comes along, who knows?
it gets it to the people who need it most. So you have, more upper middle income people, someone, making 60,000. That's not a great income or anything, but they could wait, whereas someone who's scraping by on 15, 20,000 a year supporting a kid or two kids, they need the money. So getting that to them over the course of the year, that's a really, really big deal. The other thing he did that will potentially have a long lasting impact are the subsidies and the exchanges. So, people rightly complain that unless you're pretty low income, the exchange is getting healthcare through the exchanges created by Obamacare. That was expensive, so if you had a middle income, 50,000 or whatever, you paid a lot. He hugely reduces that. So it's pretty affordable. Again, people could say it should cost less, and that would be nice. But it's a lot more affordable to get healthcare insurance if you're a middle income person, 50, 60, 70,000 a year, having to buy insurance through the exchange. It's a lot more affordable today than it was before he passed the Recovery Act. So yeah, this was a really big deal, and I was impressed.
He also is aiming to make the first 2 years of community college free. What if I think that is fantastic, especially given the enormous rise, as you mentioned, your concern about the enormous rise of costs for college. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it was great. Again, so this is a program that's very much aimed at, middle class people that may or may not go to 4-year college. A lot of them will go to 2-year community college, get a AB and get technical skills as, say, a health technician or, whatever it might be, which, is a substantial improvement over someone who doesn't have those skills. In other words, their job prospects are much, much better. Many of them will go on from community college to get a 4-year degree, which again is great. And, what
And
that
it'll
means.
save you 80 grand if you.
Exactly. You have your first 2 years covered. So
Mhm.
you're halfway home. Again, there's still the issue. I don't minimize it. Okay, you have 2 years, might be looking at a big tuition bill. Again, I don't minimize that. But, you just knocked off half of what you had to pay. So again, that's a very ambitious proposal. I mean, we'll have to see whether you can get it through the Congress, through the Senate. But I thought that was a very great thing to put out there.
Coming from New York and under the de Blasio administration, he ran on this idea of the tale of two cities, the rich and the poor. This idea that college is about to be completely unaffordable to, I don't know what percentage of Americans, but certainly I would not be able to afford it. And who knows if my child is going to be able to go to college at this rate. What what do you see are possible solutions to this crisis?
Well, I thought, you had Bernie Sanders, of course, was both running on a platform of free college. I'd like to see that. I mean, getting from here to there might be a little bit of a trip. I mean, obviously, it's not going to happen, this year in Congress, probably not next year. Who knows what Congress will look like after the 22 elections? So we'll have to see. But I'd like to see us get there. And, I think that's a proposal that has a lot of resonance in the public, not just, with left-wing crazy types, but, people want their kids to be able to go to school. So it's not a radical proposition.
I
They
mean, I
do
used to
that in
teach
other
at Brooklyn
countries.
College. That was free for most people. And so many people who either themselves or their parents went through Brooklyn College, then went off to work in the financial industry. And so I would hope that those people who benefited from that free college will maybe, support somehow free college for the next generation as they themselves or their parents had benefited from that exact same thing. Maybe they're not going to give away Harvard education. Of course not. They're never going to give that away. But some
Yeah.
education would be useful.
Yeah, and again, I think the community college is a very big step that way. So obviously, we have to go further. But I think, if Biden can get that through, it's a very big step in the right direction.
Has Biden taken off the table the paying off of the people's student loans, or at least cutting them? I've been waiting to hear. It's been kind of radio silence, and I personally think that
He's
would do an enormous amount to boost the middle class in this country.
he's apparently asked his, I guess it'd be the Justice Department. I'm not sure which agency of government. He asked someone in his administration to be looking into the legalities of, what his discretion is. Because obviously he could put a bill through Congress and say, okay, we're wiping out whatever amount of debt, all debt or half of it, whatever. They could put down the numbers on that. But he wants to know what he could do administratively, what he could do unilaterally as executive action. I know many people weighed in and said, oh, he could just wipe it out. And I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to comment one way or the other, but I don't blame him for saying, okay, what are my options here? What are my legal options? And you do run the risk. And let me put it this way. It's very likely that whatever he were to do would be contested in court, because there will be arguments on the other side. So it's not, even if, we could get our good lawyers who will say, and they might well be right. I mean, let's say that, we had God come down and tell us, here's what the law says. That may well be true, but it's not going to be God deciding it. It's going to be our court system. And presumably at the end of the day, a Supreme Court that's 6-3 conservative Republican appointees. So if you,
maybe he's waiting until he can stack that court a little bit more.
well, that might be a while. So, but in any case, you have to have a good sense of, okay, they're gonna say this is okay. Because let me just say this: if he does something, let's say he goes, okay, I'm wiping out all student debt. We might all clap our hands, say that was a great thing to do, and then the Supreme Court says, sorry, you can't do that.
Right, well, but politically, it would be very good, because he'd be like, I tried. Look at these Republicans, what they're doing. I mean, get to it.
Well, yeah, in some sense. On the other hand, people planning their lives, they're just told, okay, now you don't have any debt. And then it comes back, oh, guess what? That doesn't fly.
It's frustrating, because I guess, it's contract law, right? Because when you take out a loan, you're kind of signing a contract that you will pay it back at this amount of time. And so it would be breaking those contracts. Is that right?
I think it's more the executive action, because a lot of that is the government now you have intermediaries in there as well. So you have, lenders that would have some issue with this. So it is a question of contract law, but it's also a question of, executive authority as opposed to congressional authority. Now, one thing that I'm pretty
we need
sure
to get that Senate. We got to get that Senate.
One thing that I'm pretty sure he does have authority, because I know President Obama used this, is, a very large percent, I'm pretty sure a majority of people's student loans are paying back on the income-based repayment plan. There might be a different term for it. But anyhow, it's a percentage of your income. So the way it works, it takes 1.5% of the poverty level. So for a single person, it'd be about 20,000. And you pay 10%. I believe it's 10% of everything over that. So if I'm earning 40,000 a year, and it doesn't matter, I could have 100,000 in debt, I won't pay more than 10% of the difference between 40,000 and 20,000. So that's $20,000, $2,000 a year. Not trivial, but it's not, if I had 100,000 in debt, I'd be paying much, much more. So he has authority on that. And also I should add, I'm forgetting now whether it's after 15 years, I believe it's after 15 years, it's whatever you haven't paid off is zeroed out. So, he could change that and make that less onerous. He could make it a lower percentage. He could make it after 10 years. He has flexibility.
Hold on. I am still paying, and I'm like 1,000 years old. I've been paying for far more than 15 years. I better call somebody.
Another thing is that a lot of people don't even know about it. So one of the things that he and others have talked about is making it automatic, so that you're on this income plan. I mean, you could say I don't want to be on it, so you could say no, I'd rather, if you have a good paying job or whatever, you don't need it, or you paid off your But for an awful lot of people, this would save them a huge amount of money in loan repayments, and many people don't know about it. So if you made it automatic, you're on the plan unless you choose not to be. That would, save a lot of people money.
They don't offer that at wherever it is. I was at Sally Mae. Now I'm at the other one that bought Navient, that bought that out. They don't say, hey, did you know that you could do this?
That's another thing. A lot of these loan servicers are total sleaze bucket operations, and Obama tried to crack down on them towards the end of his administration. And then Trump went completely other way. It's like Betty DeVos said, okay, whatever they're doing is great, as long as they make money on it. So that's, again, something I think we could look to Biden to do at the very least, to crack down on a lot of the abuses. So oftentimes, like, people will get a check in a day late, and they they're hit with $100 late, just absurd things. There's all sorts of stories like that. I think Biden will be cracking down on that.
Oh, good. I look forward to that. And right after I get off this call, I'm about to call Navient and be like, oh, I heard I could get out of my loan if I've paid for it for more than 15 years.
Ask them about the plan. They know about it. I guarantee they know about it. So ask them if you qualify. I wouldn't trust them as the final word, but, ask them.
Dean Baker, senior economist at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. Thank you so much for coming on our show. We always enjoy it. I know we started out at supply chains and we ended up at student loans. I appreciate all your insights on all those different areas.
Well, thanks a lot for having me on.
Great. See you next month.
Yeah. Have a good week.
Thanks, Dean. That was great. It was a good conversation.
That student loan thing about the income-based repayments, and I realize not everyone could get in that, but a lot of people don't know about it. I've raised this with a lot of people, and they're looking at me like I'm speaking nonsense. And again, they have to be government loans. So if you have a private loan, that can't help you. But if you have a government, I forget what they call it, government guaranteed, whatever loan, it's through the government, then it's covered by that. People can argue they don't like it, it's not adequate, this and that. That's fine, but people should know about it. They should know they have that option, and a lot of people don't realize it.
And then if you're on the income-based repayment for 15 years, then you get forgiveness.
Wow. Yeah. So if, a lot of people will have debt that, if you have, 60, 70, 80,000 in debt and you're just paying 2,000 a year, you're maybe covering the interest, but you're not paying off the principal, or certainly not at that rate. Mm-hmm. Then they just write it off. So again, that's, because again, one of the things, I've been told, I don't doubt this, that a lot of people who are in the program, they see, oh my God, I owed 50,000 last year and now I owe 50,500, because I wasn't, and go, okay, well, that's bad news. But on the other hand, last year you were, 7 years from hitting the end point. Now you're 6 years. So, that's not going to matter, unless you get a high paying job, you're suddenly earning 200,000 a year. Well, then it won't matter. But,
it's kind of like leasing a college education.
Yeah.
You have a 15 years, 15-year lease, and then you're out as long as you can make those payments.
Yeah. No, it's that sort of thing. So
fascinating. Thank you so much, Dean. I appreciate it.
Sure. I enjoyed it. Okay.
All right. Have a great day.